Hi guys, Dan Kendall from My Inflammation Story. Today I got to interview Dr. Paul Clayton. Dr. Paul Clayton is a senior scientific advisor to the UK government. Here we discuss how the health protocol combats inflammation of the body.
I believe it's yourself that's put together or overseen the health protocol, which can reduce inflammation by starting with the Trondheim blood test, the balance oil, the xenobiotic gut powder, the extend. If you could go into some detail on that, please, on how that can help people like me and other people who are suffering with inflammatory and autoimmune conditions.
Well, the health protocol is designed to be a kind of a nutritional time machine. When you start using the health protocol, it's designed to shift your nutritional profile and then your metabolic profile and then your health risks back in time by about a century or a century and a half. Because when you look at the way in which our diet has changed over the last 100, 150 years, you can see that it has changed in a way that creates far more inflammation. So, for example, the 6-to-3 ratio has gone all the way up. Our microbiome has changed from being predominantly gram-positive to predominantly gram-negative. And our intake of a wide range of micro and phytonutrients has declined. So the health protocol is designed to remedy all those things. It's designed to restore a 6-to-3 ratio that is more typical of those that we saw, let's say, in the mid-Victorian period, which is one era that I've specialized in. It restores the microbiome to a configuration that you would have seen in that mid-Victorian period, and it restores what we believe are optimal levels of vitamins, trace elements, and a range of phytonutrients. What do we see when we go back 150 years? Well, when you look at the mid-Victorian era, you find a population that didn't really have much inflammatory disease at all. So, for example, we did a study where we looked at levels of coronary artery disease, heart attacks, strokes, and cancers. And yes, they do exist in that population, but at relatively low levels, about 10% of the levels that we see today. So I think that by restoring this metabolic environment inside you, putting it back, sending it back in time to that much earlier and much healthier era, you're then going to enjoy the same types of health benefits that they experienced. Now, I know that people feel they've heard or read somewhere that in the 19th century, life was brutish and short. Actually, that's not the case at all. When you dig into public health statistics of that time, in the period 1850 to 1900, what we call the mid-Victorian era, was probably one of the healthiest periods in British history that we know of. For a variety of reasons. They were physically very active. They were eating large amounts of fresh produce. They weren't eating, obviously, any ultra-processed foods whatsoever. And the end result of all that was they sort of lived about, almost to the same lifespan that we did. But what they tended to die of was either trauma or, in the majority of cases, overwhelming infection. And that was a time when society was repeatedly affected by epidemics of influenza, typhus, typhoid, and cholera, because you're talking about a time when, before adequate public sanitation, when people were living in very crowded conditions, very close together, and it was absolutely, the conditions were absolutely ideal for pathogens, which spread from person to person. And so what you find is that records of death at that time, people die very quickly and very often collectively in large numbers. Contrast that with the position today where we tend to die individually, but agonizingly slowly and very expensively. So this is not a cure for mortality, but what it is a way of reducing your risk of chronic degenerative disease. Now, we have the best of both worlds, because where the mid-Victorians were exposed to contaminated food and water, we're not. So our risk of infectious disease is reduced. And we also have antibiotics, some of which still work despite widespread misuse. So what we achieve by using the health protocol is we get the health benefits from the 19th century, and we can tack onto that as and when needed the pharmaceuticals that 20th and 21st century research make available to us. Now, I'll go dial back a little bit. When I said, well, the Victorians they had roughly the same kind of a life expectancy as we do now. but they had a far greater health expectancy. So whereas we can expect to spend the last 10% of our lives approximately becoming progressively sicker with a chronic degenerative disease, becoming progressively more disabled and dependent and expensive, what the Victorian model shows us is that if you have the right nutrition, instead of dying slowly and expensively, you retain your physical, your psychological, your intellectual health right up until the end, and then pop your clogs pretty quickly. So as I said, it's not a recipe for eternal life, but I think it's a better way of living and a better way of dying than than society currently offers us.
Perfect. So could you just explain a little bit more of the specifics of the health protocol and each of the elements of that, with the biotic, xenobiotic, the balance oil, and the extend, and what each of them do individually and in unison?
Well, but the balance oil is designed to improve your fatty acid profile and reduce the 6:3 ratio from 15:1 would be the European average, and bring it down to below 5:1, where we know chronic inflammatory stress tends to fade away. So that's one thing. Xenobiotic is really important, and it acts in conjunction with balance oil because it's reducing inflammatory stress and resolving problems in another area of the body where balance oil can't go. And that is in the microbiome, specifically the microbiota that inhabit the large intestine. We used to eat a diet containing rather large amounts of a particular kind of dietary fiber, which is called fermentable fiber. Some people call it prebiotic fiber. And if you're eating lots of prebiotic fiber, which the mid-Victorians undoubtedly did, because we know exactly what they ate, these fibers are food not for you exactly, but for the microbes that inhabit the large intestine. And if you're eating these fibers, they fuel the growth of a group of microbes which are gram-positive, which ferment or break down the fibers and produce short-chain fatty acids such as butyrate, which are very anti-inflammatory and very good at telling cancer cells stop, either killing them outright or telling them to behave. So if you're eating these fibers, the microbes in your gut are having a really nice conversation with the cells that line the intestine, and they're saying, don't be inflamed, don't be cancerous, behave normally. That's a healthy environment. By taking the fibers out of the diet, and these fibers hardly exist at all in many modern ultra-processed foods, the bacteria, the gram-positive bacteria, starve to their numbers decline, and their place is taken by other species, many of which are gram-negative. Not all bad, but if you have too many gram-negative bacteria in the lower bowel, they create inflammatory stress. First of all, they're not fermenting the prebiotics, they're not producing butyrate, so that anti-inflammatory protective nutrient is gone. They're loaded with something called lipopolysaccharide. That's what defines a gram-negative microbe. And many of these microbes, instead of using fibers as their preferred fuel, they actually eat proteins, or amino acids and proteins. And what they do is they degrade the mucosa, the mucosal layer that lays over the cells that line the intestine. They come into direct contact with these cells, which we call colonocytes. And because they're loaded with lipopolysaccharide, which is very pro-inflammatory, now you have a problem, lots of chronic inflammation. Now the environment is a hostile. This is a microbiota which is causing inflammation. It's actually encouraging and facilitating the development of cancer. And that's bad enough if that was all that was happening inside the intestines, but it's worse than that when you have chronic inflammatory stress. The tight junctions between the colonocytes start to open up. This is what people sometimes refer to as leaky gut. And you get LPS, lipopolysaccharide, moving into the bloodstream, a condition that we call endotoxemia, causing damage to the liver, the blood vessels, the brain, and a whole host of other organs, creating inflammatory stress that balance oil isn't going to do so much about. So you need to switch that other component off, which we do with xenobiotic. It's specifically designed to restore a much earlier, a mid-Victorian type of microbial population in the gut. And that's going to resolve a lot of gastrointestinal problems, but it's also going to protect many other tissues in the body. In that sense, it acts conjointly with balance oil. They complement each other. The third element is something called extend. Now, it's designed, it assumes that you're eating, the modern diet, which leaves many people rather low in a range of vitamins and minerals and phytonutrients. I don't believe in megadoses of any of these things. I think you can, potentially run into problems with at least some of them. So I don't advocate, the huge doses that some people here in the United States do. What I think is a safer approach is to take into consideration what you're probably already eating if you take an average modern diet, and just raise the nutritional profile to the levels that we find in those so-called blue zones where people lead longer and healthier lives, and don't go above that. So it's a rather more subtle approach, I think, to improving your overall micro and phytonutrient profile. And this is important because many of these compounds are protective in different ways, but they're also cofactors in various healing processes that have to take place in the body for normal maintenance and sustained health. So these are the three pillars that are all acting very, distinctly in very different ways, but together they're designed to take your metabolism and push it back 150 years or so to a time when chronic degenerative disease was far rarer than it is today. There's one fourth element that I've designed as well, which is not available yet, but that's designed to rectify our reduced physical activity. And you go back to the mid-19th century, you see a culture that's predominantly blue collar, working with their backs and with their hands, burning a lot of calories, and that has lots of benefits in terms of overall health. It's chemoprotective, as I referred to earlier, so it protects against cancer, but it protects against lots of other things as well. I think it's really great if you are willing to go to the gym every day and work out every day, walk everywhere. And that's what I advocate. That's what I try to practice myself if I can. But for those who won't do that or can't, because let's say they're hemiplegic or paraplegic, or they have they have arthritic complications or neuropathies, then I think for people like that, there are exercise mimetics. This is what they're known as in research circles, which act in a way that is very similar to physical exercise because they phosphorylate AMPK, which is known as the metabolic master switch. I'm not sure I like that term, but when you activate AMP kinase, it does produce many of the biological and biochemical effects of exercise. So it's a hack for people who can't or won't exercise. And it's designed to, again, restore levels of physical activity in a capsule in a way which are more like those that we would have been engaged in an earlier society, which wasn't as mechanized as ours is.
Sorry, what's that product called, and when will it be available?
The marketing people have decided to call it Inner Gym.
Inner Gym, okay.
Which I think is quite catchy. And we're not first people to explore this. The Singapore government, for example, has elected to give, I think, every adult something called metformin, which is an anti-diabetic medication. Metformin acts in a rather similar way. It was actually originally a natural product extracted from Galega officinalis, which I think is known as the French lily, or it's got another name as well. It's got various names. And what it does is it acts indirectly to improve AMP kinase activity, and it's a form of exercise mimic. It's now been repositioned as an anti-aging compound, but it is a drug. You can't get it without a license. And it does have an unfortunate tendency to cause quite severe diarrhea in some folk. Not other people can tolerate it, but there's a significant number who can't. So I've been looking, as have many other people, for an alternative molecule from the plant kingdom, and there are several that have been identified. One that I like a lot is dihydroberberine, which is taken from the barberry, which is a fruit that's a berry that is consumed as a fruit in some countries and made into jams and preserves. And it's a non-licensed equivalent, if you like, to metformin. It'll help to bring your blood sugar down, and it's doing so because it's acting as an exercise mimic, and it'll help you to lose a little of that deep abdominal fat, and it'll help to improve your various metabolic parameters. Unlike crude berberine, and unlike metformin, it doesn't hang around inside the gut for very long, and so it doesn't seem to trigger gastrointestinal problems. It gets into the blood rather more quickly, does what it has to do, and having tried it myself, it doesn't seem to cause really any gastrointestinal problems at all. So I think that this is it's like a next generation exercise mimetic. Does it reproduce all of the effects of exercise? No, it doesn't. But it reproduces some of the physiological and biochemical benefits of exercise.
And would someone like myself, I mean, I try to get to the gym 4 or 5 times a week. Would somebody like myself use it additionally to the gym, or would it be either or?
No, you can use it in addition if you want. And what I found is that people who've primed themselves with this, when they do finally get around after they've made that New Year's resolution, they go to the gym and they do that first workout. And you must recognize this from your own experience. If you haven't done it for a long time, you feel okay in the gym. The next day you wake up and you're sore, you're in pain, and it's really demotivational, which is why, you know, you buy that exercise bicycle or rowing machine and you use it for the first day or so, the first day in January, and then you put it in the attic and you never see it again. But the point of using something like the you know, in a gym or dihydroberberine is that it kind of primes your muscles and gets them ready. So the next time you go out there, either onto the track or into the gym, the next day after that, you're not feeling this awful aching pain and stiffness, particularly if you've also been taking balance oil. So I could do a new exercise tomorrow, which I haven't done before, and really work at it. And then there's no, you know, you get the gain and there's none of the pain. I mean, for me, I just wish I'd known about this half a century ago.
Enhances the recovery. I'd be very interested to try someone when it's available on the market. I'd be more than interested to give it a whirl.
Yeah, you should play with it. I think, you know, find out for yourself what it does for you. But I know what it's done for me. And we know a lot of very high-flying athletes now who are using this. They're adding it to their training, and they're just seeing incremental changes in their personal bests.
Excellent. Well, I'll have a chat with Rebecca and see if she can point me in the right direction of where I can get some.
Hi guys, thanks for watching today. If you'd like to head over to my blog at myinflammationstory.com and subscribe, there'll be much more content like this coming soon.